Coming up, Daniel Jones, the potential $40 million man. We discuss all the angles as we count down to the 4 p.m. deadline. Will a long-term deal get done? Is it tag time for Jones? And how does it impact all the other key decisions for Joee Schoen and the New York Football Giants? Hi, yes, my friends. It's OGP, the One Giant Podcast. You know the deal. I'm Adam Armbrecht, and this is the tag deadline coverage for one Daniel Jones. We've got Twitter up, always the highest level, quickest resource when it comes to the breaking news around this stuff. And to look at the way this deadline is being discussed, it very much remains exactly where it's been since maybe the day Daniel Jones was drafted. And certainly over the course of this past season under Brian Daboll, with Joee Schoen as the GM, the new direction for the franchise, and Daniel Jones going out and trying to prove that he is a player worthy of being the franchise guy, worthy of being paid $40+ million per season on an average annual contract. Now, in our previous episodes, when we discussed it, Andy and I have had the conversations around. It doesn't matter so much if it's $40 million, but what is the first and second year hit on this potential contract? Can you get that into the 20s, which affords you the ability to sign Saquon Barkley to a 3 or 4 year deal at the number closer to what he wanted, maybe splitting the difference, not getting to 16, but being willing to move from 12 or 12 and a half all the way up potentially to 13. So there are, we know, the ramifications there. There's also the ramifications beyond what this team does in this immediate instance when it comes to Jones or to Barkley. We know that maybe there'll be a discussion around Leonard Williams and what his contract currently looks like. Probably looms large no matter what, but certainly if Daniel Jones ends up getting tagged here, my God, are all bets off the table for what they'll have to do with Leonard Williams, because then you'd be talking about 32 and a half if we say non-exclusive for Daniel Jones, and then having 32 million on that cap hit when it comes to Leonard Williams. So there would be a lot of things to discuss around this. If you're in the conversation there saying, what up to David, who hopped in there, by all means, shout out what you'd like to see happen, what you think will happen, what you think Daniel Jones is worth at this stage of his career. Just to throw it out there, by holding on so long, DJ is screwing his teammates like Saquon, Jordan Love, and more. Yeah, I don't, Julian Love, I know you meant that. But Jordan Love being so accurate to the Green Bay Packers looks like starter going forward for them. Yeah, I don't. So here's the different levels of it, right? Let's take it from Daniel Jones' side first. Here's a guy that prior to last season, and someone brought this up, you include his last college year, you'd be saying that he's been through now over the last 5 seasons, 4 different head coaches, 4 different systems, right? So a lot of chaos. And we know the Giants haven't been a perfect franchise. So he comes into this conversation saying 2 things. One, when I look at where the QB market is going to go, I want to get a contract that is going to keep me in the money for 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line relative to where the level of play will be. This is also a guy who on his side of it would say, remember, I ended the previous year with a neck injury that people had real concerns about coming into last season. Now, we can say that all those concerns were dispelled because he played a primarily healthy season and gave the Giants an opportunity to be successful, and showcased underneath what we feel like is our first competent coach and quality run organization in years, that he can be the guy going forward. So I want that money. Maybe in some ways I want some money for services paid, right? Maybe I wouldn't have had that neck issue if I had better offensive line play or more weapons. Maybe this wouldn't even be a conversation if this was a team that had weapons around me with consistency over the last few years. So that's where he's coming from. Also, it's your opportunity to get paid. In a world where this contract does not go perfectly for him from a performance standpoint, he knows I'm not going back to free agency at 30, 31 years old and saying, hey, look at my, middle of the road value here. And from a stat standpoint, let's go ahead and get me another big deal. Now, the NFL is a QB needy league. They are not a dime a dozen. You have to really hit on these quarterbacks, whether it's in the draft or be willing to spend big capital to trade for, or really be willing to make the seismic offer when it comes to free agents. So I completely understand where Daniel Jones and his representation are coming from. From the Giants side of it, and this is where I keep standing on this, because I think a lot of people feel like, well, once this deal gets done, it's just, listen, this is a part of it, negotiations, and it's true. There is a difficulty to these things, because even if you're Joe Schoen and your heart of hearts and you're Brian Daly, said, we love Daniel Jones. He showed us the intangibles, 22 total touchdowns. Love how mobile he is. He's the perfect model of quarterback for our system. We agree with all those things. We're not going to walk into negotiations and say, oh, you want 45, 46, 50 million? Great. Let's do it, man. Whatever it takes. Of course not. You still want to make the smartest play for your team and for your franchise in terms of being able to build it going forward. However, I am not, and the contract length will tell me a lot about this. And we've heard the reporting on it from NFL Network. We've seen different personalities around the NFL coverage, around the Giants coverage, saying, well, it could come down to having some outs. So we'll give you some guaranteed money up front. We'll keep the cap hit number kind of low. And at the end of 2 years, you'll be able to walk away clean, having earned $100 million. But we'll have the out to chop that thing off midway through and cut ties if we so desire. If that's a version of what the Giants do here, then that's an indication that they are not fully sold on what Daniel Jones can be for them. Because even if let's say they aren't sold on him and they like to just tag him and say, let's do another prove it year, we understand that they're still in this process of configuring and restructuring their financial situation. We know how much cap room we have, but we're also aware that Andrew Thomas contract extension is waiting, that Dexter Lawrence contract extension is waiting, that Xavier McKinney contract extension is waiting, that we don't have linebackers right now that require a significant financial cap hit, but could, whether it's in this free agency or over the next couple of seasons. We know that we don't have wide receivers that occupy significant money anymore, with Kenny Golladay designated for release and the dead cap number that's going to come with. So there's 5, 6, 7, 8 positions that you're going to be looking across this team and saying, yes, we have all this cap room now, and the cap room is going to go up, as it almost always does in the NFL. But we need to prepare accordingly, because we can sit here and project all the money they're going to have and understand that that's a reality. We also don't have to look too far back into the Giants' history and know that when you mismanage the allocation of money, all of the sudden, you end up with a Nate Solder contract. You end up with the difficulties that Joe Schoen faced on the James Bradbury contract, right? You end up with a Kenny Golladay. If you spend it unwisely, then you are doomed to suffer from those expenditures for years to come. And I still do believe that the Giants are balancing two acts here of wanting to be competitive, wanting to be successful in the short term, but knowing the rebuild, whether you apply that to personnel and talent or financial structuring going forward, that is what you have to be cognizant of. So at this moment, 3:07 p.m. on a Tuesday, the Giants, no news yet. See JR, welcome into it. Waiting to see what breaks on it. Adam Schefter had also reported inside of these discussions that it looks like it's coming down to the wire. And here's the other part of it. So when this first was happening, when all these discussions were starting to come up, and the first indication around what Daniel Jones is going to want, and it looks like all indications are 40 million is the number. That's the average annual that we're talking about. One of the things that I had brought up, though, was that potentially when it was thrown out for 45 million, right? And if that had ever gotten real legs to it, if there had ever been real credence to that sentiment around the league and from Daniel Jones' camp, that potentially Daniel Jones could be setting the bar for other QBs, Derek Carr, Geno Smith. You talk about Jimmy Garoppolo, right? These kinds of players. And what now has happened, which plays in Joe Schoen and the Giants' favor, although the Daniel Jones camp is still not going to back down from what they want in a contract, you have to understand that when you hear Geno Smith back to Seattle, a 3-year 105. So, 33, 34 million, a lot of guaranteed money. He's older. We get that. But he had a 33 touchdown season, 11 interceptions, highest completion percentage in the NFL. When you hear that Derek Carr is going to New Orleans, and I'm not here to champion Derek Carr as being one of the best quarterbacks around the league, but he is a veteran. He does have a track record. He has thrown for a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns. When you hear that he's on a, 4-year 150, I think I have those numbers right. You're talking about, not 40, 36, 37, 38. Those numbers matter. Because Daniel Jones, while he had a successful last season, 22 total touchdowns, and he's the youngest of this group that we're talking about, and he arguably has the highest unknown ceiling out of any of these guys, and that doesn't even really need to be debated, but it's unknown. He still is unproven in a lot of ways. So now you look around at the contracts that are being given out, and if you're the Giants, if you're Joee Schoen, you're saying, well, here's market value. Right? Let's isolate it just to this past season for you, Daniel, because we agree. Previous regimes did you no service. John Mara was right. We did everything possible to break this young quarterback. But here we are in this year, and I can look and compare you to the performance of Geno Smith, to the performance of a Derek Carr, to a Jimmy Garoppolo. You have to go year prior with his injuries, obviously. But I can comp you around the league and say, hey, there's the numbers on their contracts, and we should be in that ballpark. So the concern that I would have if I'm looking at it objectively, not about whether or not I believe, don't believe in Daniel Jones, want Daniel Jones, don't want him. Doesn't matter what your opinion is there. But if the Giants end up, as I said, with this opportunity to 2 years in, cut ties and move on, then that means there's some level of, we look at Daniel Jones as a possible franchise quarterback, but more of a bridge Band-Aid quarterback. He's not a guy that we're saying, hey, listen, if he's the franchise guy and he wants $40 million, we'd say, great, let's sign you to a 6-year deal. Let's really load this thing up because we know you're going to be here for the long haul and we want to build around you. And we can turn around and really spread that money out and still give you guaranteed dollars and give ourselves flexibility to make sure we surround you with the talent that's going to make you successful. But that doesn't seem to be the discussions that are happening. It seems like this is a 4-year contract that they're talking about. And that's not something, if you think about from a franchise QB perspective, negotiations get difficult. They go down to the wire. Both sides, they want the value on the deal, etc. But typically, when you know that you want this guy to be your franchise quarterback, you can quibble over money, but the length and how long you want the guy to be around, that's always going to be more than less. So I am curious to see what the final contract comes out to be. This isn't me saying that's what I think. No, this is what Joee Schoen feels and what the Giants feel. But we'll have some indication when it's all said and done what this looks like. Taking a quick look over into here, I just saw Eric come in. Love Daniel Jones, but hate what he's doing right now. It's hurting the team. Yeah, again, this is something that I'll vehemently push back on. And then you have total right to feel that way. We know Saquon Barkley is waiting in the wings. Okay. We know free agency. We know being able to form your draft boards correctly, right? Everything is predicated on what happens with Daniel Jones. He's supposed to do this. This is what every player is supposed to do when they're up for a contract. Look to maximize their value. Look to get as much guaranteed money as possible. So it's funny. I don't sit here and look at either side of this, the Giants or Daniel Jones, Joee Schoen or the representation for DJ, and say, oh, look what they're doing to the team, or look what they're not doing for Daniel Jones. No, this is the business side of it, and you just have to live with that. Likewise for Saquon Barkley, while I love him as a talent, we've talked about the running back position and where that value can be and what your options are depending on what happens with Daniel Jones. Again, it's not Saquon Barkley's fault that he's had injuries, but he's had injuries. So that's a factor. So when you're at the midway point of the season and you're coming up on the trade deadline and a final opportunity, at least from the way the Giants were discussing things, to negotiate with contracts with players, Julian Love was among them as well. You heard the Giants went to the table with $12.5 million. And Saquon said, I'd prefer to be getting that Christian McCaffrey $16 million kind of number. Is that bad on Saquon Barkley for not signing on the dotted line and being committed right then and there? No. Is it bad on Joee Schoen and the Giants for saying, hey, we can't overvalue you, because you are a part of this franchise and because we believe in you as a player, or we believe in you as representative of the team. So yeah, who cares? What's an extra $4.5 million per year? No, you can't afford to do it. And this is the difficult spot that Joe Schoen has been put in ever since he took over as GM. He has to find a way to both value and retain the players that he believes can be a part of things going forward, while also correcting the mistakes that were made by the previous regime. Go ahead and throw this up here, Eric, back in it. Brady took less money for most of his career, knowing it would help his career. That's great. But Brady played for a franchise that was winning. Brady played for a franchise that had already shown the stability and shown that, hey, and I'll pull up. Let's pull up Tom Brady's career earnings as we're waiting for this news to break. And then we'll dive in on what we see in terms of what was earned here. So we go look at Tom Brady. He played a heck of a long time. That much we know. So remember, he obviously came in as a scrub. We understand that. MVP Offensive Player of the Year when his, let's see, salary, signing bonus, earnings. So he still ended up, he did this when he went to Tampa. So at the end of it, right, 28, 39, 30 million those final years. He earned a total of almost $333 million over the course of his career. That's what it ended up coming down to. Now, there's never been a time, to your point, there was never a time where, let's see, signing bonuses always played a big factor, right? 10 million, 15 million, 14 back-to-back years, in 2016, 2017, 20 million in 2019, always keeping his numbers low, right? I can hear that conversation. I understand the statement that you're making, but remember, it was one of the most stable franchises in the NFL, and there is an association, which by the way, and I disagree with this about, because people talked about Saquon should want to stay in New York and take less because of the off the field opportunities. Maybe, but ultimately you can say, oh, these things could come, but the contract is what matters most. And you can say that Brady took less. He did. And there was always more talent there. But what about the years when it wasn't so good? Or what about the years when New England decided, yeah, we're good. We're going to move on from you. We don't want to bring you back. So yes, it worked out for Tom Brady in terms of surrounding himself with a high level of talent or making it flexible for the organization to have success. But when it mattered most, at the back end of his career, there wasn't the reward of the big contract. So it goes both ways. Okay, Daniel Jones, I'm going to take a hometown discount here. And the big difference there is, too, I'll say, Tom Brady very early in his career showed that he could be the man, that he was going to be the franchise guy. There was never a worry that he wasn't going to be in New England for a long time, winning championships with Bill Belichick. Daniel Jones right now is negotiating a contract with some level of unknown around what the commitment is from the organization long term. And that's what brings me back to it. If you told me right now, or if you told Daniel Jones right now, hey, we believe in you, let's sign you to a Mahomes length type deal, not Mahomes money, but let's sign you to a Mahomes length type deal. Let's put 10 years on the books. You're 26 now. You're going to be here until you're 36 at a minimum, and we'll revisit it then. And we're going to end up paying you what'll end up costing us on the books on average $25 million. But over the life of that contract, you're going to earn $450 million, right? Because it's going to, you'll total it out in bonuses, incentives, whatever. And maybe that number, if we're thinking realistically around other quarterbacks, et cetera, you're going to earn $375 million. Whatever, you throw out whatever number you want. But we want you to be here. And we're always going to be able to kind of massage those numbers in different directions so we can always afford to keep the best players around you, keep key pieces around you. At least what it looks like right now is the Giants aren't saying that. They're saying, we like you. We think you can be the franchise guy, but we need to make sure that we have flexibility because maybe you get hurt next year. Maybe over the next 2 seasons, you miss 8 or 9 games combined, and maybe your numbers look pretty good, But as Trevor Lawrence continues to grow, as Burrow ascends, as Mahomes is playing, as Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, all these guys, as they're all coming up, as Hurts is getting better and better, all of a sudden you're playing, and we talked about the QBRs and the stats from this past season. Well, all of a sudden, after a year and a half from now, we see that you're kind of a middle of the road quarterback. And this is what I think, if we want to talk about the two sides of it from a fan perspective, well, one side believes that Daniel Jones has shown more than enough. He hasn't had enough talent around him. And the Giants have been a bad run organization, and that's held him back. Perfect. There is also the other side, which would be the camp that says Daniel Jones, while having a good year last year, still has a lot to prove. And while, we talked about this during the season, when you look at his QBR, something that I believe in, and you look at that and say, hey, this is taking everything into account. It does take into account his legs, which is a valuable weapon for him. It's something that may diminish over time, over the course of his career, certainly, as with many and most running quarterbacks. But the QBR, when you see him finish top 10 in the QBR, and guess what? It's all relative. It's all timing. But you can compare his QBR this year to QBR totals from last few seasons. He'd be more of a 12 to 15 guy. Some guys had down years like Aaron Rodgers. Some guys were injured. Sometimes just a wave of where things are. And that's why this really has become the perfect storm for Daniel Jones and for the Giants. Giants came into this season saying we got a long way to go and a lot of rebuilding to do. Daniel Jones performs really well, adapts well underneath the Daboll Kafka system. The Giants end up making the playoffs, winning a playoff game. That's a big needle mover in all this too, by the way. He won a playoff game. And this is the thing where I say, it's like, doesn't matter. The Vikings think they were overrated during the year. Great. He won a playoff game and he looked good doing it. Winning that playoff game is a big needle mover. If the Giants had gotten into that game, and specifically Daniel Jones, and ended up, maybe having a mediocre game, maybe he was the reason on a key late interception that the Giants lost that game, things would look different from a negotiation standpoint. I think from the Giants' perspective, they still be saying, we'd like to keep you around at the right number, but they would have a little bit more leverage to say, hey, you had a good regular season. We like where you're headed. But when it came to playoff football, you still have some growing to do. And that's okay. And that's why we're saying this. And we're going to put incentives in. And we're going to have outs in there. I think that's fair. And I think, by the way, one of the most fair ways that you could structure this contract, if you're the New York Giants, is to put it into incentives around games played. That's a nice little health bonus in there. Around total touchdowns, not passing, not just taking away the running. Total touchdowns. Around completion percentage, around wins, right? I don't know how the Daniel Jones side of that would look at it, but if you're Daniel Jones and you believe that this is a guy who, you are a player who is going to prove his worth, if you believe in your skills and if you believe in the organization and their ability to put talent around you now under Joee Schoen, hit me with the incentives. Tell me that I can sign a $37 million a year contract average, but it can be worth $42 a year if I hit benchmarks that would make me a top 10 quarterback by key statistical categories. Why not be game for that? There's variables there. Okay. But one of the variables that you probably solve is by keeping $3-4 million average annual off the books, and we know you can massage the numbers year to year, it means that you can keep Saquon Barkley. And if you're Daniel Jones and you want to earn those incentives, gosh, is it easy to drop that ball off out of the backfield to Saquon Barkley on a swing pass, right? Those things matter for the New York Giants. They should matter for Daniel Jones. They should matter for all sides. What's going on with Daniel Jones? He wants more than 45. No, the number right now, Turbo, is being talked about at the 40 million. That seems to be where things are now. Whatever number has been speculated or discussed, it looks like the 40 million is what they're holding on to right now. And I think there's been a lot of this speculation, around everybody around the NFL, that there is some speculation that it's about guaranteed money up front, length of contract, outs for the Giants to be able to move on from this. Who knows, what that looks like. And if those discussions are happening, there's probably a level of concern from Daniel Jones' camp saying, so you're suggesting you don't fully believe in me. And that can be a discouraging thing as well. Let's hit up Barry here. With our coaching, management, I say let him walk. Start the rebuild for real. Jones is off his rocker. The fan base is going to kill this guy the moment he has multiple turnover a game. Well, so, okay, let's address this from a couple of angles. Letting Daniel Jones walk is a pretty damning prospect. Letting him walk into free agency and let him hit the open market and have a team sign him. Because there's plenty of teams that would sign him. Carolina, Indianapolis, anybody, and then top of the draft, you look around there, teams that maybe miss out on the quarterback that they're shooting for. Teams, if they could, without having to give up the draft capital, would sign Daniel Jones. Now, what that number in contract would, I don't know. But it would certainly be something that would happen. He's a starter in the NFL. So letting a guy, you can't let the guy walk. Now, putting the non-exclusive tag where a team would have to give up 2 first-round picks, I was just listening a little bit on a Tiki and Tierney commentary on it. Take it for whatever it's worth, or good guys on the WFAN network. And Tiki put out the idea of like Carolina. If you put the non-exclusive, would Carolina give up 2 first-round picks to bring Daniel Jones there? I don't know. It was an interesting thought process. 2 first-round picks is a lot. Of course it is. But there's some teams that fall into these murky grounds. If we pull up the NFL draft order right now and think about Anthony Richardson obviously having a heck of a combine for himself, I'm surprised that people were surprised by it, given what a natural freak athlete that he is. But when you look through this and you say, what if you are the Tennessee Titans, who may part ways with Ryan Tannehill? You're at pick 11. Are you getting up there? Are you going to get one of those quarterbacks? And if not, and if you say you could, and we're going to have to give our 11th pick and another first-round pick. Maybe you can do it. Maybe it takes more than that. But maybe you don't believe in any of those guys. Is 2 first-round picks too much? Probably. But there's teams that I think would have those conversations. Carolina at 9. They're going to have to move up the board to go get their player, their quarterback of choice, most likely, with the way some of these things are working. So there is a fascinating element to it from that standpoint. There's some teams that would do it. I think that, like, for example, if you let this kid, so let's say you let Daniel Jones walk just to have that conversation. Teams that would automatically be in discussions to sign him if he was a free agent with no other strings attached. The Carolina Panthers would. The Atlanta Falcons would. Like, just take away the draft. There's teams that would, if they could, they would be in the conversation. Atlanta, Carolina, Tennessee, the Jets would be in the conversation. Again, regardless of what else is being talked about, the pursuit of Aaron Rodgers, etc. Washington would be in that conversation. Tampa Bay would be in that conversation. I'll leave Baltimore off because let's just say that, Lamar Jackson's definitely going back there 100%. And that's probably it, right? Out of all those teams running through the first round. That's 5-6 teams. 5-6 teams that if it cost you nothing and you could pursue Daniel Jones on the free agent market would be in on it. That's a guarantee. 2 first-round picks, that's a different story. But again, it's very difficult to try to make those discussions. In 5 years as a quarterback, Daniel Jones does not deserve to be New York's quarterback. Smart fans will look at his stats and say he has not done enough to be in New York. Listen, I came into this season as a guy who believed Daniel Jones had a lot to show and to prove over the course of the year. I thought that he did show and prove a lot of things, and most of that's just about progressing, right? Just getting better. So if we go and think about the Daniel Jones stat lines, and let's put the consensus bag is Daniel Jones has not had the best talent around him. We agree with that. But my long-standing perspective has always been, yes, I understand that if you had everything perfect around you, it could be X. And a lot of teams and a lot of quarterbacks have that. But in the instances when it's not, are you capable of elevating? And basically just what's your sample size when things aren't great, when things aren't perfect? Because it isn't always going to be the best version of it. The Giants will get a number 1 wide receiver here. They will add to the defense. They will add to the offensive line, right? So here's what we can say positively about Daniel Jones. The QB record, winning season this past year. Hadn't had that before in his career. The Giants hadn't had a lot of winning seasons prior. Completion percentage, gone up every single season from 62 in his rookie campaign to 67 this past year. That's a positive. His touchdowns after that rookie year, we know, have been very muddled. But the touchdown percentage has been his best this past season since his rookie year, 3.2%. His interception percentage, 5 this year, 1.1%, the best of his career as well. So those two statistics, best since his rookie campaign when it was 5.2 in that 24-12 year. And you are on, while a low level in only 15 touchdowns, a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. You can like that. Yards per attempt, always basically been the same, 6.6 up to 6.8 from rookie to last year. Again, better receivers can certainly help those numbers a little bit as well. Other big thing, obviously, is the rating and the QBR. The rating has gone up every year. You can give him that alone. And then the QBR. The QBR had dropped every year from his rookie year. 55.7, 54, 41.5, and then 60.8. Big part of that, the rushing numbers, right? The total touchdowns that he's been able to have in those games as well. Also had 4 fourth-quarter comebacks and 5 game-winning drives this past season. Those two numbers, he only had 2 total fourth-quarter comebacks in the first 3 seasons and 3 game-winning drives. Those matter. Like, there's no way around it. Those do matter when we're talking about these discussions. Now, if we just move into real quick here, the rushing numbers, this matters as well. I remember going into the year prior saying that I wanted to see Daniel Jones rush for over 600 yards. And he ended up having a very shortened season, just 11 games, 300 yards rushing. This past year, 700 yards. And if we go back and we just do the comp, right? Because he had 2-1-2 in the 3 years prior from a rushing touchdown standpoint. Will it always be 7? Maybe not. But if he's going to run at the volume that he did, which is double either of the previous 2 years, 65 and 62 respectively, had 120 rushes this past season. If he's going to run 100 plus times, then you feel comfortable saying he's a 500-600 yard plus rusher each and every year. So the 22 total touchdowns and 5 interceptions, and we'll go ahead and do the double check on the fumbles as well. But 22 total touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Go back and remember that in that first season that we talked about with the touchdown ratio, where did we end up? So in rookie year, 24 would have been 26-12, including the rushing. Second year would have been 12 to 10, including the rushing. And then 12 to 7, the 2 years ago, if you included the rushing. 22-5, including the rushing. That matters. And we all know the fumble numbers that we've talked about before too. That was an enormous glaring issue in his rookie year. It's really hard for me to hang my hat on that anymore. If you're being objective about the conversation, you're going to be hard pressed for me to say the fumbles, 19 is rookie year, 10 is next year, 7 is next year. Now, had 6 fumbles this past season, 120 carries. Is that good enough? No. And if we want to lump them into the turnover pile, then we're still going to be talking about then 22-11, 2-to-1 ratio. And I think that that's important because you can't get away from the fact that while he was better, he's been far better over the last couple of seasons protecting the football, both throwing and running. But if you're going to look at those numbers, it's a fair complaint to say, hey, we're talking about a guy that struggled to avoid that area, especially if your legs are going to be a weapon for you, right? If you're going to run 120 times and have 7 touchdowns, then I need to know, and those fumbles, I have to go into it and say whether or not they came on QB sacks, QB hits, QB strips versus when he was actually running the football. But I need those to be sub 5, right? If you're fumbling it 4 times or fewer in a season and you're throwing, we can move it up a little bit because we want the touchdown passes to be higher. If you're keeping it under 10 interceptions a year and you're keeping it under 5 fumbles a year, 15 total turnovers as a quarterback, if you're thinking you're going to be averaging 20, 25, 30 touchdowns combined for the season, yeah, I can get behind those numbers. Those numbers can add up for me. But it does come down to what you think. It comes down to what do you think he's going to be capable of doing going forward, and what do you think has been holding him back, skill set or talent around him? And I think the answer lies somewhere in the middle. But that's the great debate. Because if you're a pro Daniel Jones guy, you sit here and say no wide receivers, no offensive line, right? No consistency, schemes, play calling, etc. Okay. If you're anti-Daniel Jones, or if you're just someone who says Daniel Jones isn't worth $40 million a year, right? Then you look at it and you go, yeah, but the turnovers are still rough. He only threw for 15 touchdowns, right? Like, I think you can paint a picture either way that you want it. The fan base, from everything that I can see, has been consistent in being divided about this. I'm seeing the conversations in here, by the way. So, it's not, I don't have to look too far. And we appreciate everybody that's in here on these lives, having these conversations with us. Real quick here. I don't understand the hate for this guy. I don't think he's worth 40 million, but the man has such a high ceiling, I'm going to guess you mean, can make every throw and has legs, and count on Daniel will always be Daniel haters. Yeah, and I think that that's true. Like, again, this is the great example. I can tell you all the things I love about Daniel Jones as a quarterback and tell you I don't think that he's worth $40 million, right? And that's, I've made this statement. If you believe in Daniel Jones, then getting confused about the $40 million, I don't get that. If you believe he's a franchise quarterback and you know how contracts can get structured, I don't care. Andy has brought this up consistently on the show. Tell me what the average is. Tell me what it's going to cost me in years 1, 2, and 3, because then I still have flexibility to do other things. My biggest concern about Daniel Jones is whether or not I think that he is a guy that can help you win, that can be a Super Bowl winning quarterback. And I mean that in the same way that when Eli Manning was the quarterback. Eli Manning was an Iron Man for the Giants. He had incredible playoff runs, which matter greatly to what his legacy was. And he had some of the best defensive lines on his team when he made those playoff runs. And he had, with Plexico Burress, obviously a top flight wide receiver, great complement of receivers over those runs. Can Daniel Jones be that guy? That's my big question. Like, that really is. That's my big concern, or my big drawback from being committed to him. Unfortunately, I personally, if you were going to go away from Daniel Jones, I would have made that decision prior to this year for this exact reason right now. Not because I don't think he'd be successful, not because I don't think he won't be a starter in the NFL, but because if I didn't commit the 5th-year option to Daniel Jones, which you understand why they wouldn't, and I play out this season, here we are. A guy that had a pretty good season, showed a lot, but that didn't necessarily check every box to say, we believe in this guy as the franchise quarterback for the next decade plus. And because he didn't do enough to prove that, but did plenty to say he's worth a sizable contract, this is where we find ourselves. Big shout out to Carlos Vids. Thank you, man. Really appreciate it. We do the hustle over here. We do the grind on YouTube, and gestures like this really mean a lot. And your statement here, Lamar is worth 40 plus, even 45. I'm not even thinking twice about it. Daniel Jones, we can all agree, is not really worth that. Lamar is the move. Do I agree? Well, here's what I'll say. And I've seen fans debate about this too. If you told me right now, so I did this before with Daniel Jones, free agent, what is it, right? If Daniel Jones and Lamar Jackson are free agents right now, and this is the way that I think Giants fans, for the sake of this argument, should think about it, right? They're both free agents. There's no restrictions. There's nothing required to get them other than the contract. I wouldn't hesitate to give Lamar Jackson $45 million a year. I would, like people are right now, debate whether or not Daniel Jones is worth $40 million, right? People have talked about Lamar Jackson has injuries. People talk about Lamar Jackson is not a great passer. And I've said this numerous occasions. When you're a Giants fan or a fan of another team and you look from the outside at Lamar Jackson, you think of all the things that don't look so good from a statistical standpoint, up and down inconsistencies, turnovers. I can tell you right now that they have not done a great job whatsoever building that offense around Lamar Jackson. I can tell you right now that they have overly relied on his legs and sold short the value of developing the passing attack. Having tight ends is great, but they have not put together the right complement of receivers for Lamar Jackson to be successful. He doesn't need field stretchers. He needs quick twitch, short range guys that can get the ball in their hands and make big plays afterwards. He needs to be able to roll out of that pocket, get off the edge, and survey the field on the run. He needs the Kadarius Tonys of the world. He needs the Julian Edelmans of the world. Like, those are the guys that you need to surround him with. Baltimore has not done a good job with that. And Lamar has still been an MVP in the league. Injury concerns, of course. No doubt about it, right? But if you're talking about what have I seen to this point from these two players, it's not a debate. Lamar Jackson is the better NFL quarterback. Like, that's it. End of discussion. Doesn't mean that Daniel Jones can't be successful. Doesn't mean he can't have big years. But I really find it hard to not be objective about that when we have those discussions. Yeah, a guy like Hollywood Brown, by the way, you're throwing in there. Hollywood Brown is a good example. Had a good season with Arizona, obviously, on that move. And again, you can say here's one player here or one player there. I don't want to do it right now, but I did this previously, and it'd be a good discussion. Looking at the receiving cores that Lamar Jackson has had in his career, and just saying, hey, where are they in the hierarchy of the NFL, right? The last time I did it, and this is going back even before this season even, when I looked at that, I think it ended up being like, hey, man, you're consistently going to talk about it being somewhere in the back half, closer to 20 than 15, probably on a year-to-year basis. Now, you can't deny Mark Andrews and the talent that he is at tight end. But again, it's just there's been a lack of balance there. They've done a good job sometimes with running backs. There's been injuries there that have affected that. So there's like the totality of factors that you can think about when it comes to any player around the league. But I think my big takeaway, at least in this moment, would just be saying, can I easily paint the picture where Lamar Jackson is worth $45 million a year? Yes. Do I understand why you can debate Daniel Jones being worth 40 to 45? Of course, right? At a minimum, track record, there's a lot more there from Lamar Jackson than from Daniel Jones. Look at the numbers for the last 3 years from Lamar past 2019 seasons. Numbers seem to be used against Jones, but what about Lamar? Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, you can go, actually, I can do this over, I'm over on Pro Football Reference right now as we continue just to keep our eyes here. And what are we coming up on? 341. We got a solid 20 minutes. If we look over here, we have the opportunity to compare to Lamar Jackson, right? These two players. And to your point, because when you look at the year by year, and we'll do that, right? But these guys have been, and Lamar's been in the year one more league. So let's just do the quick rundown. And we know that by the way, Baltimore may have not done a great service in every aspect around Lamar, but they've been a phenomenally run organization for a very long time, right? They have not had the pitfalls that the Giants have had. So an extra year in here. But 45-16 record for Lamar, 21-31-1 for Daniel Jones. Completion percentage is almost identical. Now Daniel Jones has trended up, and I believe when we look at Lamar year by year, we'll see that it's gone down a little bit for sure. The interceptions, 38-34. Again, one more year for Lamar. So, that's certainly better. Total touchdowns, 101 touchdowns to 38 interceptions, 60-34 for Daniel Jones. And it's not a bad ratio, by the way, for Daniel Jones. And then obviously we just talk about what was the last big one that I want to touch on there. We won't worry about that too much. And then you have the yardage. We go into also here's a good one to throw out too. Lamar Jackson in the playoffs. Let's do the comp, right? Lamar's 1-3, in playoffs. He struggles in playoffs, 55.9 completion percentage, right? The rating of 68.3. These are good things to knock him on. 3 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Now, in just 2 games for Daniel Jones, 2 up, 1 down touchdowns, 63%, very close to career average in percentages. So obviously, the playoff numbers have not been as good as they should be, or as you would expect them to be for Lamar. Let's go in, though, and just highlight what you're speaking about there. Sorry, I want to make sure I give you the right shout out. Gavin, let's make sure that we highlight the point that you're making. After the MVP season, now Lamar, so he plays in 15, 12, and 12. So health, a concern. Now you can say, again, all we can do is live by the numbers as far as the record. We understand more talent. Okay, fine. But still winning seasons in every single season that he's played in. I mentioned about the completion percentage. Here be the big one. This year in particular, just 62.3. So rookie year, 58, spikes to 66, And then 64, same exact number 2 seasons in a row. And then at 25, 62.3%. The yardage, mediocre, right? He's only thrown for 3,000 yards once. The touchdowns have been good, not great. And to your point, Gavin, 16 up, 13 down last year. But now you would say 17-7 this season. Injuries, let's just put the injuries aside for a moment. The fact that he played in 12 games and could have had another 5, well, we could at least say, right? Just on the numbers, played 12. Let's give him 2 or 3 more picks. But let's also say that just by the way those numbers go, he's going to have 23, 24 passing touchdowns to 10. Something like 24 to 10 probably would have been reasonable on a full season. So the numbers from the ratio standpoint are good. The completion percentage isn't great. The QBR, now here I think is interesting though, because you mentioned about some of these stats are going the wrong way, but the QBR, which took a big dip the year prior, jumped back up to 59 this season. MVP year, 83 on the QBR, right? Using the natural athleticism to your advantage when it comes to him. Last footnote would obviously be the rushing yards, where this is a guy that's run for 1,000 yards twice, MVP year 1,200, 1,000 the next year after that. In just 12 games in 2021, 767. And he ran for more yards than Daniel Jones did in the just 12 games that he played this year. Now, the big factor being you got to be healthy enough to be there to do that. So yeah, again, it's fair to bring up, hey, he was an MVP. He has that in his trophy, right? It's in the mantle case, but has he done enough, right? Has he done enough since then to not say maybe things are coming back down to earth? This would be if I'm a Lamar Jackson defender, I say I don't think that they've done the best job with him and around him to develop him in both areas. And if again, I would say, what do I think would be the case if Lamar played under Brian Daboll, right? Like it'd be just an interesting mental exercise to say the least. We won't go too much further down this though. We'll hit on a couple of these other ones here. Just I would gladly take 2 first-rounders for Jones. We can package those picks plus ours and get up to the top QBs in the draft and spend $38 million on 2 or 3 players in positions of need. So this is the other one, as Joseph brings up here, right? Because let's get back into it. And Gavin, just on that, yes, wins and losses. Well, by the way, it's not a QB stat, but it's 1,000% a QB stat. I understand the point that you're making. It's hard to talk about a QB that plays on a subpar team and doesn't have great great stat lines. However, it's also impossible to go look at some of the best quarterbacks in history and not find a mostly positive win-loss record, right? Like at some point it matters. At some point it matters a great deal. That has to come back to me. And by the way, Daniel Jones is only one more 10-win season away from starting to turn that thing back around. If you believe in Daniel Jones, the easy thing to say would be like, hey, give me 4 years. Give me a 4-year contract under Brian Daboll with Joee Schoen as the GM. Daniel Jones is going to get more wins and going to be in a position. The one thing I didn't look at there, I don't know this. I don't know what these numbers are going to be. So it's not trying to put anything in his cap. Fourth quarter comebacks for Lamar Jackson in his career, 7, game-winning drives, 10, right? So he showcased some of that. That's a good QB stat when it comes to showing their value, just like Daniel Jones has shown that, especially this last season. Sorry, just to get back to Joseph here for a second. This, I think, is the other big question. If you're a Daniel Jones supporter, and again, I'm good either way. If Daniel Jones is back on the contract, I'm excited for the next phase of his development. You're not going to hear me knocking him. If he's here on the tag, I'm going to be pro him balling out and then getting a big contract next offseason. So I legitimately mean this. I'm talking about it from both sides because I can understand both sides of it. And that's maybe the splitting hairs here thing is I don't think that Daniel Jones has fully shown that he can be the franchise quarterback. And I also don't think that the Junior Football Giants over his 4-year career did enough for him to be able to show that he can be the franchise guy. But this is the great question. If you're a Daniel Jones guy and you think, hey, I'm happy for him to be the quarterback, great. But if somebody told you to give you 2 first-round picks and you could go spend money in free agency and reset the timeline on this franchise, would you do it? That I think is more than any other question we could ask. That's the one to ask. If you put the non-exclusive tag on him and a team, the Colts, the Panthers, whoever, said, we're taking him. 2 first-round picks are yours. We're taking them. Would you sign off on that deal, knowing what the QB class is this year? That's an interesting one to me, and a very worthwhile discussion. And I wonder, maybe most very staunchly pro Daniel Jones fans would say no, but I think that could move the needle for you. And if that does, it makes a difference, because the Bengals aren't taking 2 first-round picks for Joe Burrow, because the Bills aren't doing it for Allen, right? The Chargers aren't doing it for Herbert. The Jaguars aren't doing it for Lawrence, right? Go around the list of guys they're not doing it for. And just to give one little toe back in the water of Lamar Jackson, they said maybe they're going to put the non-exclusive. Let them go to market. Let the market tell us what we need to pay you, and then we'll choose to match it. So wherever you think about Daniel Jones or Lamar, there's at least some consensus that they're willing to put their toes in those waters, where other franchises with their franchise quarterbacks wouldn't even want to have the sense that was possible to be in the air. Big shout out to Tuto, my guy. Good to see you in here, man. Massive salute and respect to Big Boss Adam. It's a standard quotation from Tuto, man. Diehard Giants fans in the chat. Greetings from Rome, Italy. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Enjoy your time over in Italy, my friend. Always good to see you in here. A diehard Giants fan, wants this team to do the right thing, wants this team to be successful. And I think maybe, the other thing we can all agree while we're waiting for this news to come is, don't we all agree that we just want whatever this is to be done? Like can we put it that way too? If I told you right now that somebody is going to give two first-round picks and the Giants are moving on, what would you say? You believe in Joe Schoen? This is one thing I think most Giants fans, all Giants fans agree on. Believe in Joee Schoen. Believe in Brian Daboll. So if you tell me we're moving on from Daniel Jones in whatever capacity, great. I believe that you're going to make the right decisions. If you tell me we're committing to him, great. I believe that it's going to be right. But that's what it comes down to, right? We can have the discussion either way. One other thing while we wait that we didn't get into a lot of is the combine. So I did a little bit of coverage on the defensive line. There's a lot of guys that came out in there. There's some players like Jonathan Mingo, who I talked about over on Substack. Excellent combine for him. There's a guy that, in all these players, because we'll talk about a lot this week. I think that we could see the Giants, we can start to shape this Giants draft board, which will be a lot of fun. Some guys that we thought maybe 162 and back to the 200s, maybe getting close to that 128. And if we think about the Giants draft board, just to give ourselves a reprieve from this discussion, if we think about the Giants draft board, we have to understand that you have 25, 57, 89, 100, and 128. You have 5 picks in the top 128, and I do include the 128th. I'm not going to say 4 in the top 100 because there's still value to be had there. That's 4 critical positions that you can address. And if we're talking about prospects for the Giants, is the offensive lineman. One of them suffered. I'll pull up the name here because I'm forgetting it, but he was listed ahead of. So I was talking about Tripman for the center position, potentially at that 57th pick, securing that there. And there was a player who suffered an injury that was right inside that range. And it's things like that at the combine, combined with poor performances or good performances. All of a sudden, you see these names start to shift. And if it's an injury, well, boom, 2 or 3 interior offensive linemen get jumped up a few steps there. And that'll be fascinating to see how the Giants approach it and whether or not they still find value at those spots. Will they be looking to use one of the 2 third-round picks to say, hey, we'll move up the board from 57 to target a guy that we like? Or could they maybe even move back a little bit? There's a lot of possibilities here. So all this week, once this ends, that's what we're going to turn our attention to, building up that draft board and what we love about it. Appreciate everybody being in here, though, by the way. Always good to sweat things out with some friends. John, I don't think I pulled you up here. Garofalo and NFL Network, that Jones people want to do a long-term deal before the summer, if no deal today, holding us hostage, basically. Yeah, again, If you're, well, let me ask you, John, in the chat, like, are you, I'm phrasing it as anti Daniel Jones, but if you could, would you prefer to move on from Daniel Jones? Answer me that in the chat, because I think that informs what you're saying about holding someone hostage, holding the team hostage. Again, if I'm Daniel Jones, if you say, as Joe Schoen has said, he's going to be here, he's going to be under center for us. You told me that you think I'm the franchise guy, but now you're not necessarily telling me that you believe that I'm the franchise guy. Give me the 6-year deal. Let's get long with this thing. Let's spread that money out. Let's make it team-friendly money on a year-to-year basis, but commit to me long-term. If the Giants aren't willing to do it, I don't have a problem with it, but I understand why Daniel Jones would hold out on it. Tommy, there's Tommy, man. Jones is a top 5 QB with real O-line, D-line, receiving core. Ink Jones, 4 years. Tag Barkley, draft D-line, O-line, linebackers, DBs, find receivers, late draft, undrafted free agency. Yeah, I mean, saying that Daniel Jones, if you do those things, understood that you're not saying, hey, if you make it difficult, it doesn't matter. It's not gonna make a difference. Let me see here. We have something coming in, right? I keep my eyes on the prize here with the Daniel Jones, just in case it breaks, as we are 5 minutes out, and there's at least some speculation. Nothing from Schefter just yet, and I know there's plenty of people to pull from here. NFL Network, plenty of people to have the discussion with. They got a lot of NFL Network has a lot of the combine stuff hanging out up there, which I'm excited about. Keep this one going here. Sorry, but so I wanted to just hit this one here. When you say top 5, so again, my question to you would be, and I'm not here to, I'm not here to trash the thought. But again, complete leaders, QB NFL, and I'm only doing this for namesake. Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert. Let's take Tom Brady out of the mix there. And these are guys in terms of this right now by yardage, which is a fine way to do it. Let's do it. Why don't we do it by touchdowns, since we know that that'll at least give us a nice little group of players. Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Geno Smith, Cousins, Goff, Rodgers, Brady. But then Herbert, Tua, Lawrence, Carr, Prescott, Hurts, Dalton, Lamar, Davis Mills, and a bunch of other random people, right? Daniel Jones, 21st, tied for 21st with his touchdowns this year. But just in terms of, putting him as a top 5 guy, so that means you have Mahomes, Herbert, Burrow, Allen, Lawrence, Hurts, Aaron Rodgers, at least in the short term. I'm not going to put Kirk Cousins in the conversation because I don't think anyone perceives him to be a top 5, even if sometimes his statistics will tell you that he's there. Derek Carr is not going to be a top 5 guy. Russell Wilson seems to have fallen off. I mean, you got 7 guys there. Prescott, you want to put the 8th guy in there. And then we're going to be talking about other players like Lamar Jackson coming back, make him the 9th guy. Is Kyler Murray going to figure things out, make him the 10th guy? There's at least 5 of those dudes there that you got to hop over if you're going to see Daniel Jones be a top 5 guy. And then you got the rookie class coming in. Like, I think sometimes, like in this moment, he put up a top 10 statistical QBR season this past year. Some of the numbers are good on that. But again, you look it over in totality of years, it's going to be interesting. See if we get any update here. Really safely assuming that we get some concrete numbers here. And then, by the way, they said have a 4-year deal in place with quarterback Daniel Jones. Okay. So, and some people mentioned Dunleavy in there before. Okay. It looks like no official numbers yet. 4-year deal, though. That's the initial conversation happening here. And franchise tag for Saquon Barkley, also being reported by Dunleavy. So 4-year contract. We'll find out what the number looks like. That'll be fascinating. and we'll find out what they try to accomplish when it comes to Saquon Barkley. They've tagged him to try to continue to negotiate in good faith. That'll be interesting as well. And the one last thing I'll say, and I'm just using this one, Scotto, just because you said it here, right? 40 million, that's insane. Give me a break with this guy already. What I would tell you is, I want to state this out loud. AAV doesn't matter. Well, I explained that a little deeper. Oh, guarantees. Yeah, I mean, fine, the guarantees matter, but again, the average annual value. Oh, in totality of the contract. Yeah. I think that's what you're saying. Again, what's the guaranteed money up front? What are the outs for this? That will be interesting to see too. Fresh shout out to Tuto. I hope you've got your Peacock streaming app to watch Italy versus Wales. We give you the shout out, man. Saturday, 3 p.m. here. I am recovering from my surgeries. I'll be on the sidelines. If you don't know Tuto, follow him and then support him as he's rugbying it up coming up on Saturday, 3 p.m. I do have Peacock. And it's Saturday when there's nothing really going on in terms of a sporting, other sporting events. I got hockey that I watch. It's an off season. So fantastic. Yeah. Be looking forward to that conversation. Be looking forward to that game, man. Good luck to your team, even if you're recovering from surgeries right now, Tuto. Man. All right. Yeah. Italy, Wales, 3 p.m. on Saturday. I'm excited for that one. All we can hope is that he proves he'll be worth his salary. Yeah. Oh, so that's the other thing too. Somebody mentioned about the 40 million. I said this before. I'm just going to briefly say it again. If you're saying it's like, 40 million makes him a top X quarterback right now, it does, but new deal for Herbert, new deal for Lawrence, new deal for Burrow, new deal for Hurts. Those four guys alone, boom, are all going to overtake him. Right. And then you're going to have, so it's again, I know it's a hard way to look at it, but 2-3 years from now, like Daniel Jones overall, depending on what this is, if we assume even 40 million, Daniel Jones is going to end up being like the 10th to 14th highest paid quarterback, like year over year. He'll fluctuate a little bit, but those numbers are going to ride high. Like it's going to move like that. And that's the one part about getting hung up on $40 million does not matter. Like that doesn't matter in terms of the overall NFL. Cap's going to go up over the next couple of years as well. You're going to see bigger contracts. It's the nature of it. It'll be interesting to see. What I want now is the hard numbers. And I'm guessing I'm assuming it's going to be like I'm assuming it's going to be the 40, right? I'm assuming that it's going to be the 40, 4-year, 40 million. And then just to clarify on the Dugan one, running back tag was 10.1. Saquon turned down a multi-year deal with at least 12 million during the season. So it'll be interesting to see how he responds to the tag. And this was, by the way, just to clarify, one of the concerns that I had around this was that what happens with Saquon? He said he wants to be here. Understand you can be successful. When they hit him with that tag, what are they saying in terms of ongoing negotiations and trying to get a long-term deal in place? Because one of the things that I said was, if you want to have Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley back, some low-level concern that you're going to run into Saquon Barkley saying he's not going to come to camp on the tag. And I get that. Running back, injury history, wants to get paid, showed out last year, is incredibly valuable to Daniel Jones being successful and this team being successful. That's going to matter in a great deal. Give me 1 second here. I'll be right back in. Thank you very much, Barry. I really appreciate it. Anyone that's in here, appreciate you coming and having the conversation with me, being a part of this. Hit subscribe, turn on the alerts, help us out as we continue to build this thing. But this is what it's about, man. When you're locked into your team, when you're a fan of your team, you want to be able to have these discussions with the fans and hopefully come out the other side feeling good about things. Order felt better about it if it was more years. Longer deal, you're saying there. Give me 1 second here. I'll be right back in just 2 seconds here to have the conversation about the impact on Saquon Barkley, and we'll wait a few more minutes to see if we get some official numbers on this contract as well. Okay. Fix the old hat here. Make a little adjustment. What I got on the line here, Daniel Jones and Giants are finalizing 4-year $160 with $35 million in incentives. So $35 million in incentives. Which will be interesting. Curious to see what exactly the language of those incentives are going to be. And are you, Eric, are you saying that that's what they ended up reporting as being like the first year cap hit? 20 million? We'll see it. Yeah, tag on Barkley. Yep. So, I mean, it's all right there. And this, by the way, if you think about what we talked about, so you're talking about this 20 million here. I say give DJ 20 million per year, 2-year contract. Well, that was never going to happen. Just Larry, just to be clear. I mean, first of all, it's not going to happen because they already signed him the contract for 160 with 35 million though in incentives. So I'll be curious about the language of the incentives. Is it games played? Is it touchdowns? Is it playoff wins? I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of opportunities around that conversation as well. So that'll be interesting to see. And if you 35 million, and I'm looking at a couple different ones. Yeah, just 30. Yes, there's 35 in incentives. So if you said it was 195 on the total, if he hits all those incentives, and I'm guessing it's probably either making the playoffs, playoff wins, maybe some touchdown numbers. Those are maybe going to be easy ones to hit. And if you hit those marks, you can talk about it going from being 40 million in what would have been closer to, the almost 50 million mark, but spreading that out is going to look a lot different. Jones is the future. Barkley is one without Jones. Team terrible without Jones. Yeah, it was funny too. We had a conversation about like Barkley. Would you want to keep him around if Jones wasn't going to be here and you're drafting a rookie quarterback, right? Like all those kind of conversations. And I like there was some value there, mostly on the fact that you'd be resetting your QB price timeline. So it'd be easier. Let's put it that way. Easier to keep Saquon and have him be the guy that you lean on. Now I think it's important you want to keep him around so that you can maximize Daniel Jones' value, right? We always talk about the Giants having given Daniel Jones weapons. Well, he has one, and arguably one of the best weapons in Saquon Barkley in the NFL. Obviously, it'll be about adding wide receivers now. Also, I hadn't seen Cy Guy come in here. Hopefully, the money amount against the cap this year is nice and low. Then we can get him weapon or two. Yeah, and I think that's the critical part we've talked about before. Linebacker. Hearing rumors, little Buffalo linebacker hitting the market potentially. Do the Giants want to go to free agency to accomplish that? And again, it's all relative to the draft and what they think they can do there. I think the interior of the offensive line is critical right now for this team. I love going into the draft and addressing one or two of those needs there. But if you can find the right guy in the open market, I'm more than happy to go do that, especially if you think that my preference would be if you go and solidify that interior offensive line, then you maximize whatever weapons you do add. And I feel far more comfortable going into the draft and adding weapons at many different rounds. And we'll talk about that this week. Where are the wide receivers that I like? Where are tight ends that I like that are further down the list? I don't want to take one too high in the draft. Still would, again, love to address one of the interior offensive line positions, ideally by 57, 89 at the latest. But when you look at some of these drafts and where that position value is, it's pretty hard to find that value going back to 89 and 100 that you really think you can trust. I want to plug and play guys. Specifically, I want to plug and play center if I can get one. And that's what Trippman looks like for me. So it'll be interesting to see how they break it down now and how that initial first year cap hit creates flexibility, right? If it's 25 million in the first year or even 30 million, that's the flexibility to be able to eat that cap number of Saquon Barkley this first year. Or maybe it makes it possible to continue the conversations and give him that extra couple million over a 3 or 4 year deal. But I have to assume the way that they structured this is going to be critical. Guaranteed money will be critical. And I'll be very curious to see how this season goes. bottom line is Daniel Jones is the quarterback for the Giants going forward here. Very curious to see what it looks like after 2 years. Some speculation about, like, is there outs built in for the Giants after 2 seasons? That's going to be a fun one to see too. And ultimately, keep it even keel. Like, at the end of the day, I believe that. Oh, and here's a good one. Bobby Skinner put this out over on Twitter. Great Giants, content creator. Daniel Jones, $40 million with an average AAV, of 17.7% of the upcoming salary cap. To compare that, Prescott is 21.9, Cousins is 15.8, Ryan Tannehill is 14.9. I think that that's fair. And Bobby mentions, seems like Daniel Jones has set a new precedent for the middle in terms of, like, you're not a top tier guy, but you're very clearly the best of that middle ground. So him occupying that 17.7, whatever you think about Dak at this point, he was on that trajectory, has a lot of those stats, right? Got the big contracts. He's moved the needle. And him representing more of your total cap is important. And it's also important that the Giants keep him well underneath that 20% mark, because that still gives you the flexibility and the opportunity to still go out and do some things. So that's where we stand right now. Guys, unfortunately, I got to get out the door. I'm going to tell you right now, this has been, first of all, awesome. Thank you to everybody that joined in on the live. Really, really, really appreciate it. We'll continue to come back in this week. We'll highlight updates around the contract information. We'll talk about Saquon and what we're hearing now that he's going to potentially get hit with a tag, and if they'll look to continue to negotiate, how Saquon and his camp responds to that tag. And then most importantly, though, the combine. That all just wrapped up. A lot of talent to look at, a lot of players to discuss, a lot of fun to be had. So how do we build out? Daniel Jones is going to be here. At a minimum, he's going to be here for the next couple of seasons. Again, as we wait for that final language to come out. Big opportunity for him. Big opportunity for him to have success in the upcoming season if the Giants execute this offseason and draft the best way possible. Let's go ahead and get the job done and see if the Giants and Joee Schoen can really capitalize on the opportunity. Because, by the way, one other conversation we're going to have this week too is, let's go back and look at the draft class and free agency of Joee Schoen in his first year. How truly successful was it? Where were there misses? And where did obvious injuries play a big factor in it? Because while we believe in Joee Schoen, it's not like he hit home runs across the board in his first offseason as GM. A lot to build on and a lot to be excited about. Thank you, everybody, for coming in and joining me today. Really appreciate it. On the podcast feed, over on YouTube. Support it, follow it, like it, share it, do all those great things. We'll continue to be bringing you all the New York Football Giants news as it breaks. And as always, as Andy Mackowitz would want, need, and nay, demand you, the people, know, let's go Big Blue.